Hello, this is a tutorial on the GWT-DND library. My name is Sahand Sadjadee. I'm one of the lab assistants for the Web Programming and Interactivity course. As you know, using the GWT-DND library is mandatory for you for implementing the drag and drop feature inside of your apps. So I'm going to show you how to use this library so efficiently. For doing that, I'm going to use a pre-coded web application which enables the users to drag a row from one flex table and drop it into another one. Yeah, like that. This is my project. This is a GWT project. If you have installed the Google plugin for your Eclipse, you're going to be able to create a project of this type so simply. Yeah, let's get to my source. I do have three classes. The first one is my entry point. The second one is my flex table drag controller, which is a drag controller. And the third one, my flex table drop controller. I'm going to talk about these two classes later on, but let's get started with my entry point. For having the user interface, I've used the standard GWT components, as you can see here. I do have two flex tables, one text button, one text box, one button, three labels, and two horizontal panels, three vertical panels, which have been imported beforehand. Yeah, as you can see here. Okay. Whenever the module is loaded at the client side, I do some component initialization. So the first thing that I do is the layout. Then I do some flex table initialization. I do some I add some meta information to my flex tables, like the column names. Yeah. Then I add a click handler to my add button. The reason for doing that is like I do want to have the user the ability to add more information to the source flex table. Yeah, like that. And this method we'll call the add data source, which is a method I have implemented myself. This method splits the whatever string it receives into some substrings. If the number of substrings does not equal 3, it will return false, which will lead to an error message to the user. For example, if I forget to enter the email address, then I'll get an error message. But of course, there are more issues to be checked, but this is a sample checking. And then I add some default information. Because there is no server-side component, I need to add some default information here. So whenever the module gets loaded, these information will appear in the source flex table. Okay, we're going to talk about the add data source later on. So let's get started with our GWT-DND. For having the drag and drop feature inside of your app, you need to instantiate two important objects. The first one is the drag controller, and the second one is the drop controller. And these two objects give you the drag and drop feature. So you can drag objects around and drop into some dropping area. But the first thing that you need to decide is like where exactly is my dragging area and where exactly is my dropping area. In my case, the dragging area could be the whole page, So I can drag, oh, no drag, I can drag from any, I can drag any object from the whole page, and then I can drop it into the target flex table. Okay, so then I will pass some information to the my flex table drag controller constructor. From object-oriented point of view, the first parameter, the first argument, should be an absolute panel. And this represents the whole page for me. The second argument, if I pass true, it means I can drag from the dragging area and drop it anywhere. But if I pass false, it means I can drag from the dragging area and drop it only into the dropping area. So in my case, false works better. Okay, let's get to the drop controller. From the object-oriented point of view, the target or the dropping area must be a widget. So, yeah, which is in my case a flex table. Yeah, these two arguments I have added myself, and I'm going to talk about them later on. The reason that I have these two user-defined types is that the myFlexTable drag controller is actually a pickup drag controller, but I need to change some behavior inside of the pickup drag controller and add more functionalities to it. So I need to inherit from it and do some overriding, for example. And the same true about the myFlexDrop controller. For example, if I need to change some behavior about the untDrop method, then I need to extend from the abstract drop controller and then do some overriding. Of course, I call the super version of it first of all. Okay, so this is the first step. The second step happens here at the init components. Here, it says, please register the drop controller for my drag controller. So from now on, my drag controller knows this object as one of its drop controllers. And you're not only limited to one. You can have as many as drop controllers as you need for your drag controller. Okay. So this is the second step. So far I do have the drag controller, the drop controller, and I do have the drop controller registered for my drag controller. But remember, these objects are not seen on the screen. These objects are working behind the scene. So what you see are the widgets and the panels. But I cannot still drag any object around and drop it into the dropping area because I need to make objects draggable. For example, if I do want to drag this route, I need to make this route draggable. Otherwise, I cannot drag any object around. So I do that here. The first thing that you need to know is the make draggable method. This method is called on your drag controller. So by calling that method, you can make objects draggable inside of your dragging area, which is controlled by your drag controller. Okay, so kind of this object needs to be inside of your dragging area. And the second thing that you need to notice is that you need to make the objects draggable whenever you add them to the user interface. Otherwise, it could be kind of complicated if you want to do that in any other place inside of your code. So make them draggable whenever you create them and you add them to the to your user interface or to your dragging area. Okay, so here I create the for example, here I create the name, and then I just add it to my flex table. I specify the row, the column, and then I pass the object, and then I make it draggable. But there are two issues here you need to notice. First of all, you can only make widgets draggable. So if you want to add text to your flex table, they cannot be draggable. So we do some trick. We do not add texts, we add labels. And then we set the string that we desire as the caption for that label. So it will look the same to the user, but not to the GWT-DND library. And the second issue that you need to notice is that the label needs to have a valid parent. And the flex table is not a valid parent. It needs to be a panel, for example. So what I do here is like I create a horizontal panel, I create a label, and then add the label to the horizontal panel, and then I, instead of adding the name to the flex table, I add the horizontal panel to the flex table. Still looks the same, but different to the GWT-DND library. So first of all, make widgets. Second of all, make valid parents for your widgets. Okay. The same true about the surname and email. So far, I do have the drag controller, the drop controller, and I have the drag controller registered for my drop controller, and I do have the whole components inside of my flex table, all of them draggable. Okay, so I do have the drag and drop feature now. But there is still one problem here. The problem is that when you start to drag a row and drop it into some other flex table, what you see being dragged around is not a row, it's a label. Because we don't have any widget named row. Actually, we have 3 widgets all looking, appearing as a row, but in fact they are not integrated. There is no row as a widget. So when you try to drag objects around, actually you're dragging, to GWT-DND it looks like you're dragging a label, not a row. And it doesn't look pretty nice, so okay, for solving that problem, then we use the proxies. Proxies are widgets that appear whenever you drag drag an object from your dragging area and drop it into some dropping area. So this is what the user sees. So we can set a proxy which contains the whole information about the row, and this is what the user sees exactly like here. Okay, yeah, exactly like here. So this is the proxy. So the user does not see a simple label anymore. The user sees the whole row information. So it feels like the user is dragging the whole row, not a label. Okay, so for having the proxies, I do have some exceptions. Okay, for having the proxies, we need to do some more coding. The first thing that you need to do is, let's get to my init components and here. Okay, the first thing that you need to do is calling the set behavior drag proxy on your drag controller and pass it true as an argument. It tells your drag controller that you need to see proxies. It means that drag controller needs to create proxies whenever a drag operation has been initiated from the dragging area. So the drag controller does that by calling a method named new drag proxy. So whenever you initiate a dragging operation from your dragging area, or on the other hand, whenever the drag start is called, the new drag proxy is called by the drag start, which has the responsibility for returning a widget which represents a proxy. This is your proxy. And the drag controller will show this widget as the proxy. Okay, I'm going to use an HTML object, which is a standard GWT component. And then I'm going to have some checking, and then I put some HTML code here. This is what is seen by the user, which contains information about the name, surname, and email. Okay. The next thing that you notice here is that I have not used the drag context. The drag context holds the information about the whole drag and drop operation. But here, it only contains information about the label being dragged around, not the whole row. So I need another technique to get information about the current row, the row which is being dragged around. I cannot use the drag context because it only gives me some information about the label, for example, which is being dragged around. It could be any of these. Okay, so how can I do that? In the entry point, my entry point, I do have a person. This a field named current person of type person. This class contains the whole information about the current row: name, surname, email. So whenever the user starts the dragging, it will have the whole information about the row is being dragged around. So how can I do that? I define 3 mouse handlers here, as you can see here. And these 3 mouse handlers will store information about the current row into the current person. These are mouse down handlers. You can use another technique for retrieving your information. This is my technique because I don't have any linked list. That's one of the reasons. Okay, as you can see here, the same here. And then here I pass a reference to the current entry point to my drag and drop controllers. So the drag controller has the access to the entry point, and it calls a method called getCurrentPerson, and will get access to the name, surname, and email. And that's how it will be able to show me the information about the current row inside of a proxy widget. Okay, about the drop controller on drop, I do the same technique by calling parent.getCurrentPerson and getName to show the information dropped into the dropping area. So still, I do have, I use the same technique for transferring information from one area into another one. I do not use drag context because it's not usable here. The drag context contains information only about the object being dragged around, not the whole route. Of course, there are other techniques. Some of them might be better. Of course, you can find better techniques. This is my way, and you can play with it around and improve it. If you have any questions about the mentioned topics, you can contact any of the lab assistants, and you can also check the GWT-DND homepage here to find out more about the library, work with some demos, and of course get some documentation. Thank you for watching this video, and goodbye.